Stockholm, and welcome to Data Speaks Business. We are thrilled to have you here today. My name is Mark Matucci, and I'm an Enterprise Systems Architect at DBT Labs. And that title is pretty generic. I even had a colleague to me say just a couple days ago, what exactly do you do here? But what that really means is I get to work on cool and innovative data projects at DBT Labs, automating our finance and operations workflows. And then I get to spend some of the time talking to awesome people like yourselves and about the work that you do. Throughout my entire career, I've straddled the line between business and data, as I've been both an analytics engineer as well as a finance and operations executive. So I'm deeply passionate about finding synergies and driving connection between data leaders and business people. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion today about how we drive better alignment between these two groups. So before we begin, I just want to take a minute to thank our sponsors who have made today possible. So a huge thank you to both Fivetran and Datatonic, who are part of making our modern data system ecosystem so great. So to set the tone for today's event, I want to share this quote for you from Roland Busch, the CEO of Siemens. We were just in Munich a couple of days ago, and I found this quote, and it really spoke to me. So he says, the more digital our world becomes, the faster we need to learn. And I think that that's really a critical point, and the foundation for learning is obviously information. And so, in this incredibly increasing digital world, data is quickly becoming one of the organization's most important assets in addition to its people. So what does that mean for people like yourselves? What are the implications? Let me set the stage for you. Many data teams are familiar with calculating metrics like customer satisfaction or website sessions, product usage, or even things like who's attending marketing campaign events. What many data teams might not have visibility into is exactly how that information is being used. Well, I can tell you that many finance and operations people, for instance, are using this to create their sales forecast. Things like product usage can be the best indicators of new customer adoption as well as customer retention. So if they're triangulating this information into a sales forecast, how is that transformation work being done? Well, I don't want to overgeneralize, although I will. And I would say 9 out of 10 times, and probably 10 out of 10 times, that transformation work is being done in Excel or something similar to Excel. And so while we've had all of these innovations in the modern data stack, our finance and operation counterparts have been left in the data stone ages. These groups would benefit just everything that we've become accustomed to in the modern data stack just as much as we are, from automation to testing and version control. Long story short, business leaders need help executing more efficiently and more effectively. Therefore, it's essential that data team members and business leaders collaborate and communicate as effectively as possible. But how do we make that happen? How do we drive better alignment between these two groups? My hypothesis is that both teams need to lean into each other's domains even harder. Data teams need to learn more about business, and business leaders need to learn more about what is a data warehouse? What's stored in there? And how can we use it and unlock its potential? And my guess is that most of you probably at least partially agree with me, and that's why you're here today. And so I want to applaud you and recognize you for being intentional about trying to address those gaps that exist today. So given that backdrop, we're going to spend a lot of time today discussing how do we create better alignment between data teams and finance teams. You'll get to hear a perspective from a CFO. We also have a very qualified and distinguished panel where we'll learn about their experiences in data and how they've been a bridge between data and business in their careers. We'll have a roundtable session where you'll be able to discuss with your peers your experiences and insights on how we unlock the potential behind the data warehouse. And then finally, we'll conclude with lunch. So to get us started, I want to introduce Daniel Lee, the CFO of DBT Labs. Daniel and I have worked together for a number of years now, and the one thing I always tell people is that Daniel's had more jobs than anybody else I've ever known. Daniel has been a Starbucks barista, a shoe store sales clerk, even the inventory manager at a furniture store, and just to name a few. Most recently, he's helped both Okta and Zoom navigate the IPO process as a finance leader. And when I hear Daniel talk, it doesn't matter whether he was a furniture store inventory manager or a VP of finance at Zoom. The one common theme is that data has been a critical part of not only his own personal success, but the success of the organizations as well. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Daniel Lee.
Thanks, Mark. That'll be interesting if I did work at IKEA, but unfortunately I did not work at IKEA. Mark's correct. I did have a lot of jobs growing up. My family operated a couple of small businesses, so as the only child, what they would do is they would take me along and have me work for free, essentially. And so my parents would actually do things like a dry cleaning place, a furniture store, even beauty supplies and a beauty salon shop. And so I would just work in the back. And I remember my parents had this notebook that they would write down inventory that we would have to order every other week. And they would do it not based on analytics, but based off of gut feel and what they knew. And so I would then use that book to then transform the data into order form. So I was looking into the data warehouse, and I was doing transformation before I even knew what I was doing. So that's my story of how I ended up here at DBT. Let's just talk about what's happening in the market today. So many of you are probably looking and saying, okay, what's happening in the States? What's going on with tech multiples? The reality is that over the past couple years, interest rates have been relatively low. And because of that, investors were looking for ways to make money off of their investments. So they would fund all these startups that we've seen over the past couple years. What we've seen, I would say over the past 12 plus months, is a normalization. So as interest rates begin to rise, folks are looking at companies not to just generate top line, but to also generate profits as well. So we're starting to see a normalization. So as a result of that, it's no longer growth at all costs. It's a combination of growth plus profits. So you can see that businesses are actually reverting back to what had made them successful, is that they're looking at sustainable business that'll be around for a long time. And the key part of all of this is folks are looking within, and data will actually help drive and inform these types of decisions. So how does that impact data teams and all of us, frankly? Profitability. This is the new standard. Everybody's looking to do more with less, and in many ways, G&A organizations. So in my role, I own finance, accounting, operations, and then HR and legal. So these are teams that are considered cost centers because we're not revenue driving. And so as a result of that, things are getting scrutinized even more. Visibility. Can we flex? Can we do scenario planning? I'm sure many of you are being asked to not just look at one scenario, but what happens when things go up and down? What is the new normal? And efficiencies, long-term sustainable growth. I walk around Stockholm, I was in Munich, and I see these companies that have been around for hundreds of years, and they're still innovating. That's how you maintain a legacy long-term. However, this is a massive opportunity for us to be able to look within and see what we can do better. So how do we change from being a cost center to a value driver? I always tell my team, anything that we have to do more than once, how do we find ways to automate? Also, when we're talking to our business partners, how do we think ahead? How do we say, okay, what are the next things that they'll need from us? And how do we plan ahead for that? And also making analytics and metrics consistent and in a way that everybody's looking at the same thing, but then at the same time automating. One of our core values at DBT Labs is what we call moving up the stack. And I always tell my team, if you want to continue to perform value-added work, you have to automate all of your tasks at the very bottom. And then that allows you to continue to take on more and work on interesting things. So becoming a value driver starts with taming analytic debt. What does that mean? So typically, every company that I've been at, I would say headcount is a metric that you would think would be easy. I can sit and count around the room and say, how many people do we have here? But at every single company that I've been at prior to DBT, and even at DBT when I first started, was you talk to finance, they'll say, what is the headcount? You talk to the recruiting team, they'll give you another number, and then you'll talk to somebody in operations and they'll give you another number. Why? Because headcount could be based off of start dates. You could do an average. You could do based off of ending. If somebody's on LOA, leave of absence, that's another form of headcount. So every company that I've been at, it was so inconsistent. And when I took Okta and Zoom public, as part of our quarterly earnings, we have to report headcount. And that was the thing that I'd have to run around the room and scramble for days just to get the right number. And then also, when was this updated? How come the number was 455 versus 457? And that made a big difference. And then also, there's a lot of process bottlenecks. When we don't scale things the right way, it requires a lot of troubleshooting to get things right. And so this is an example of what analytic debt looks like. So I seeked out to solve headcount, and I'll share more of this in the next couple of slides. So what does DBT do? Many of you are current DBT customers. Many of you are prospects. So any company that is looking to move towards a modern data stack, a cloud data warehouse, needs two tools. You typically need a tool to extract and load the data, which is what Fivetran does. And then you need a tool to transform the data. So DBT is a transformation platform. We have reusable SQL version control. We have our IDE. We also have software best practices and CI/CD testing. And then we have documentation, which ensures consistency and documentation, as I mentioned. So this is the platform that we built and leverages both SQL or Python. And the great thing about DBT is that we support multiple cloud data warehouses. So as a result of that, with a scalable platform, we have things like semantic layer and docs, which allows everybody in the room to make sure that there's a consistent methodology, a single metric. We know when things were last updated. And then most importantly, we can collaborate with each other. So how does finance become or leverage data to become not just a value driver, but a value multiplier? Here's a typical finance and operations ecosystem. How many of you have used a form of these software applications? Many of you in the room, right? So these are what I would call, some of the best in breed software. And this is an example of some of our data stack. So you typically have multiple source systems, and then you also have a data warehouse, and then you have a planning system, and as Mark mentioned earlier, spreadsheets. Finance people love spreadsheets. And then you have business insights, either Looker, Tableau, Power BI. So this is how things are being stitched together today. So you have operations users looking at a set of data. You have finance users looking at a subset of these data. And then you also have the data users. So all of this is being stitched together in a very manual way. And as source systems continue to add and subtract, every company that I've been at, I've looked at a list of applications and it's in the hundreds. And because it's SaaS is always innovating, that list is constantly growing. And so as a result of this, there's this built up manual processes that happen over time that makes it very difficult to scale. It's very complex. And I mentioned, different data and different sources, not a single visibility, multiple languages. And then as a result of that, every CFO is probably walking to you and saying, okay, what are the list of applications that we're not using? What are the ones that are causing a lot of manual processes? What are the ones that aren't giving us the value that we need? And then as a result of that, as we adopt new technology, it makes it very challenging. I truly believe that this is the way of the future, a data warehouse-centric approach. So what does that mean? At DBT Labs, one of the first things that I did when I got here was I evaluated how we've done things in the past, and I asked my team, how can we do things differently? When I moved from Okta to Zoom, I didn't just carry all the things that I did at Okta. I said, what are some of the lessons learned, and how do I apply things on a go-forward basis? And then when I joined DBT Labs, I said, we have this amazing opportunity in front of us to do something that's never been done before. And so what we've done is we've actually moved a lot of our logic out of these systems, and we've actually pulled all the data into the data warehouse, and we've built the logic on top of DBT. So as a result of that, the three users are looking at the same thing, and they can collaborate with each other across all these multiple platforms, whereas in the past, I would have to create individualized customer reports in each. And then that allows us to then feed back into our planning system and then our business insights. So when I talk about headcount now, all of us know that we're talking about the same thing. So as I mentioned, logic in a single location, we have trust in the data, change management, there's tons of visibility there. And the cool thing is you can actually take your logic with you. So as the applications come and go, the logic stays in the same place. So you don't have to recreate that every time a new application gets added or removed. And so here's an example of a professional services pricing problem that we were working at. We were trying to figure out, as we launched new pricing and packages, how do we come up with pricing that makes a lot of sense? And so what we've done is we've looked to pull all of these source systems using Fivetran into the data warehouse. And then as a result of that, we've defined some of these key metrics, gross margins, utilization rates, direct costs, indirect costs, et cetera. And we've created these metrics, and then we've created an output, which allows us to flex. And so as things come and go, we actually have a price variable that we can share with the business. Now, this is not the only driver, but this allows us to have informed conversation with our business leaders and then make recommendations. And this is an example of what we call our Campaign 360 dashboard. This is a sample campaign where we pulled all of the data into DBT. We're then able to say, okay, which are the ones that are generating the most value? And as a result of that, as a finance leader, partnering with my finance and ops teams, they come to me and they say, Daniel, we've executed this campaign. It's driven a significant amount of ROI for the business. And I can look at this and say, you know what, this is working. Let's reallocate dollars into this. And I can make this decision on a fairly rapid basis. I don't have to wait until the quarter end. I can pivot throughout the entire quarter in an era in which we need data now and we need to make fast, decisive decisions. This enables me to do that. And frankly, this level of detail is something that I've been waiting for throughout my entire career, and I'm able to see that here. And this is the fun part, headcount. So historically in the past, we would have our ADP data, which is our payroll. We would have Greenhouse, which is what we use for recruiting. And then we would have our planning data, Pigment. And so all of that gives us a different form of headcount. And in the past, we would then have manual spreadsheets that would allow us to interact across all these different teams. We then pulled all of this data into the data warehouse, built the metrics in DBT, and then we then leveraged Fivetran, of course. And then this allows us to automate this process every 15 minutes. So I can look into my dashboard and my entire organization, from people to legal to finance to operations, we're all looking at the same thing, and it's happening in an automated fashion. And these are some additional projects that we're working on and have been working on. So we're doing accruals, leveraging the data warehouse, revenue recognition, sales capacity and pipeline. We're also doing revenue modeling and forecasting, and then we're also sharing targets across the organization. And as a finance and accounting team, this is scary at first because, as you all know, revenue is probably one of the most important metrics to get right. And the alternative is to buy an application that does that. We said we're already leveraging the data warehouse. DBT has built-in testing, has built-in documentation. We have clear audit trails, and I said that allows me to do everything I need. And as a result of this, we actually close our books in 6 business days. I can tell you when I was leading up to the IPO at Zoom, it probably took us about 3 weeks to close our books. And I think 6 days is just the very beginning. One of the other things was that when we raised our Series D in February of last year, one of the commitment to our investors was we needed to pass an audit with one of the big fours within a certain time frame. We actually did that while moving from Google Sheets to Pigment, and then moving from QuickBooks to NetSuite, and we passed our audit within four months. And KPMG said that we had one of the cleanest processes and documentation they've ever seen for a company of our size. And knowing that, I went all in and said, how can we do more of this? And here we are a couple of months later, or a year later. So what are some of the lessons learned? I always tell my team, automate early, invest in the right systems and process. Even though G&A might be considered a cost center, if you do it right, it ends up being a value driver and a value multiplier. So that way, all the manual processes do not build up over time. If I didn't start early, I might be closing in 3 weeks. And if I close in 3 weeks, it doesn't allow me to look forward and help the business. And also, folks tend to be afraid of the data warehouse. Like it's sort of this complex thing. But as I mentioned, when I was a 5-year-old, looking at my parents' notebook, transforming this into order forms, I mean, that is a form of a data warehouse. So it's not that scary. And then also, how do we move up the stack? Move from just providing data and analytics to actually providing action. So an example of the 360 campaign is the marketing team can come to me and say, this is what we're doing, this is the value that we're providing, and these are the things that I want to do. As a result of that, I can reallocate funds and make sure that we continue to invest in the right areas of the business. So DBT, where are we today? We have 20,000 customers using 20,000 companies using DBT. We have 3,600 customers and 60,000 plus community members. I would say EMEA is one of our fastest growing regions, and we're excited to continue to invest in this region. DBT as an open source product was founded in 2016. We started to commercialize our product 2.5 years ago. And most recently, we've launched new products such as the semantic layer and Python support. And these are some of the European customers that we currently have today. So thank you all for all of your support. And with that said, the two key takeaways that I always share with my team is that always be curious, always constantly learn, and don't be afraid to try something new. Because I always look back at some of the things that I've done is that everywhere I go, borrow some of the best things that I've done, but also leave room for trial and error and give ourselves the opportunity to experiment. Because as we look forward, there's a lot of things that we can do better. And so I encourage all of you to do that. And, especially as you come back and think, okay, well, there are tons of pain points in the business. And as part of this is how do we use data to give us the insights, but ultimately, how do we help the business solve problems? Okay. Any questions that I can take from the room?
Hello? Yeah. When you mention automation accruals, is this something that you would leverage through DBT, or is there an external source that you would use for this?
We would actually leverage DBT for all of that logic, because ultimately, what most people do today is they'll download something from their ERP, and people then build all of that logic in Excel, right? And so anything that you can build in Excel, you can build it in DBT, and that allows you to have a consistent framework to then share with all the other stakeholders across the business. Mark, did you have a comment?
So I just want to make sure I don't create massive noise. Hello? So for accruals in particular, we have a number of different data sources where we need to grab information from. Like we have contract information in Salesforce, we do expense management in Airbase, lots of different systems. And we collate that information together using DBT. And then we use reverse ETL tools to then push those journal entries into the ERP system and book the accrual. So it automates it all the way from start to end.
Thanks. Yeah, so when you talk about digital transformation, you talk about technology, processes, and people. So I'm curious, now you talked about technology, but what would be the most value-adding actions when it comes to people or processes?
So just to clarify, you're asking what is the most value added when it comes to automation and people and process?
Yeah, exactly, or as you talked about, getting to actionable insights.
Yes. Okay. I've always believed, and a part of that is I like to make complex things very simple, because if I have to do something more than once, such as a financial close, I always say, okay, well, if it's taking me 5 hours, how can I automate that to take me less than 30 minutes, for example? And so I would take a look at issues that you currently see across the business. One of the issues that I saw coming into every company was headcount. Every investor that I talk to, every CFO that I talk to, headcount is always the thing that is very challenging to solve when you would think that it would be easy. So one of the first things I did was I said, how can we solve this for the company? And so as a result of that, 6 teams that used to do things manually now have an automated way, so that frees up their time. So my people business partner can actually go and support the teams. My finance team can actually help the data teams invest in the right areas, right? And so just each business is different. All of you are at different stages of your journey. Some of you are at startups that are dealing with a lot of manual, chaotic processes. Some of you are at more mature companies that have been around for 100+ years and are looking for fresh ways to innovate. So it just depends on where you are in your journey. I've worked at companies that have been around for 40+ years that are saying, Daniel, we've always done this, but maybe there's a better way. I've been at companies that said, we have 0 processes, help us implement something. And I feel like depending on where you are in the journey, always understand, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And I think Apple does this in a very beautiful way, is that they work really hard at making complex things simple. And that's how I've always operated myself, is that there are a lot of hard things that we can do. And so how do we make that as easy and as seamless as possible? And I think IKEA does a really good job of that, But then I have to build my own furniture, and I probably do it wrong half of the time. But there's just this amazing process that IKEA has built over time.
Hi there. I'm curious to know, with the more mature companies, are you seeing DBT replacing some of the more traditional ETL tools that a lot of companies have got kind of like firmly embedded in their processes?
Yeah, we definitely see a lot of companies moving away from some of the legacy tools, Informatica as an example. And so anybody that is looking to move towards a cloud data warehouse, which I feel is fairly flexible, and there are more and more cloud data warehouses that continue to pop up. And so Redshift led the way 10 plus years ago, and then obviously most recently you see Snowflake and Databricks, and then there's many more that are starting to pop up. And so yes, as folks move from what you typically call ETL to ELT, we definitely see Fivetran partner closely with us, and then obviously DBT has become the standard in this new way of doing transformation.
Yeah, thanks. You spoke about extracting and transforming. I'm curious if DBT or how you see the other tools being used for actually taking all the data in the data warehouse and getting the insights out of them. So the final kind of short feedback loop, aggregate this metric and so on.
Well, so if you're saying, do we see a lot of competitors in this space in terms of ELT? I would say Fivetran is a big partner of ours. There are other tools that have popped up in the transformation space. We are starting to see some competitors, but typically the biggest competition that we see with our product is our open source product, right? Folks tend to start and they explore with open source, and there's a lot of digital native companies that have started with our open source back in 2016. We've only started to commercialize our product 2.5 years ago. And so as we continue to build and add new features and add to our platform, that's an opportunity for us to, win some of these customers over.
Cool. And just to clarify, I haven't used kind of the paid version of DBT, but I'm kind of wondering about how you usually see customers visualizing, like doing the final gathering of insights based on all the data that you use DBT to kind of transform.
Got it. So you answer this?
Yeah, so we actually internally use a lot of different tools for accessing the data. Traditionally, Looker has been our primary visualization and business intelligence tool that we use internally. But we are starting to adopt others internally as well, like ThoughtSpot is integrating with our metrics layer, so it's a very good way to access our semantic layer and the metrics that it provides. For some kind of more advanced analytics, we are using data notebooks. So we've been using that more and more for visualization, and tools like Hex actually integrate with our metrics layer as well. And then just as critically as the business intelligence layer, as I alluded to earlier, we also do a lot of data activation or reverse ETL as well. So we have a lot of marts or export models that are just as effective as delivering data to our downstream operational systems as they are in terms of business intelligence. So our primary tool that we use internally for that today is HighTouch, but we have a number of different reverse ETL processes as well. So we serve up data not just for the reporting layer, but also for that data activation layer too.
Hello. So yeah, in order to achieve these automations and the different way you were able to make your processes more efficient, what skill sets would you say you need in your team when it comes to data? And also, do you have any way to collaborate with the people who work with the data warehouse? And
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and we'll spend a lot more time talking about that today. I think that's one of the key points. So when I think about our analytics engineering team, many of them are as competent and kind of the data transformation and the data pipeline and the transformation and SQL, all those things, as they are on the business side. So that Campaign 360 dashboard came from our analytics engineer, Brandon, and Brandon knows the marketing space. He's supported marketing teams for many years and has been an embedded member of kind of the marketing team. And so over time, he's developed this business insights, which allows him to like understand how the business is driven. And so he can create amazing dashboards like our Campaign 360. So our analytics engineers do lean in and try to learn more about the business. And historically, we used an embedded model of where analytics engineers were assigned to a specific team to try to drive that collaboration and knowledge acquisition. At the same time, on the finance and operations side, we are looking for people who have more advanced technical skills to join the team as well. So many people, you know, if they're in finance and operations, they're going to put like advanced Excel user or something like that on their resume. We are looking more towards people who have SQL skills, a little bit of coding, at least knowledge of what a data warehouse is, and are competent with self-serve business intelligence and things like that. And so it is our expectation that finance and operations people contribute to our DBT project as well. So I personally checked in a PR and merged it this morning. So we are hiring people who have that skill set. And then in addition, on a weekly basis, I'm running a DBT for G&A, so a DBT for general and administration functions, to help them acquire the technical skills that they need in order to be more self-service, own their data domain, and do things like that. So in addition to who we hire on the finance and operations side, we're also, you know, being very intentional about educating those people as well. So it's kind of who are we looking for, and then enabling people within the team to be more informed.
Well, just one point to what Mark is saying. 15 plus years ago, I was considered the technical person because of my advanced Excel skills. And then Excel, now most of us have some form of advanced Excel skills. What I've seen in terms of hiring is that there's a lot of finance and ops folks that have just graduated within the past couple of years. Most are taking a data course, or most have taken a data course. And I see SQL as an extension of what advanced Excel was 10 to 15 years ago. And so, yes, there's a balance of looking for people with, I would say, technical skills. But as I mentioned, as part of my takeaways, I think finding somebody that is just naturally curious, right? And finding somebody that has an open mind that is willing to learn. Because I can tell you that some of my technical teams, I remember when I was telling Mark, hey, we have to do this. And, you know, there was some hesitation at first because of how we've done things in the past. But I think that finding somebody that has a natural curiosity and an open mind will allow you to take things very far. You know, myself, who was a naturally curious person that was the advanced Excel user, is now on stage talking to you about transformation, you know.
Well, thank you all for your questions. At this time, I'd like to invite our panelists up on the stage, and we'll hear from them.
Good to see you.
Hi, nice to meet you. Daniel.
All right. Well, I am very excited to introduce the people who have joined me today. They have tremendous careers in data, and I think they have a lot of insights and experience to share with us in terms of driving alignment between data teams and business. So first, I'd like to introduce Pedram. He's the head of data and process digitalization at EQT Group. EQT is a private equity firm. And for those of you who don't know what a private equity firm is, although I'm sure many of you do, it's an investment management company that invests in a bunch of loosely affiliated private companies. And so the data team at a private equity firm, I think, is really cool, because not only do they support kind of the decision support and the operations of the parent private equity firm, they also act as a technology advisor and business advisor to all of the portfolio companies that they've invested in. So the way I think about it, it's like you have a bunch of data jobs all at once. So I think it's a really cool experience. Prior to joining EQT Group, Pedram has had a multiple of consulting and internal data jobs. Most notably, he was head of business intelligence at a little company based here in Sweden. You might know it, called Spotify. So I'm very excited to have him here. And then we have Ernesto, a solution architect at DBT Labs. He started his career as a data practitioner, but over the last decade or so, he's actually been a sales and marketing person at some of the leaders in the data space, from Tibco to Looker, and now, of course, DBT Labs. So not only does he have firsthand experience, being a data practitioner, but he's also spent a lot of time learning and understanding from data teams what are their issues and helping them to find solutions to unlock the value. So I think he's uniquely qualified to be able to speak to how data teams can better support their business partners. In addition, he's also the self-proclaimed modern data at DBT Labs. As one of the first employees here in Europe for DBT Labs, he's had the role of fathering and mentoring many of the employees who have joined us here in the region. So we're excited to have Ernesto on the stage with us as well. So please give my panelists a round of applause and welcome them.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Pedram, we'll start with you. I kind of came into data in a very unintentional way, but I'm curious, how did you start your career in data? How did you find yourself here?
Very similar to you, actually. It was very unintentional. So I was studying physics and quantum physics specifically, and really was intrigued with the way that how atoms behave and that everything is about statistics and it's not about continuous movement, and how the fascinating world of atoms, how that works. So I applied my mathematical skills and my physics skills, and then I realized that, oh my God, what am I going to do when I'm going to start a job? Because the only thing that I'm good for now is just research, and that was not really what I was intending to do when I actually want to start my profession. So then I thought, okay, I know how to program MATLAB and R programming and a little bit Java code, so maybe I should start working a little bit as a programmer. And that's where it all started. So, and every time I went out as a consultant, everybody thought, okay, you know mathematics, you know physics, and you know programming, so data is a good thing for you. So I got a lot of data projects, and there it all started, basically.
That's awesome. Ernesto, how about you?
Sure. Probably pretty accidental as well. I studied criminal justice and computer science, and I wanted to be a digital forensics investigator. And I just didn't get a job in that. So I joined a small startup that was like writing CRM applications for various types of customers. The one that I worked with most closely was called Pet Innovations. They made innovations for pets. So it was a self-cleaning cat toilet. So it was kind of a very early IoT device. It broke a lot. They had all of their customer support cases. They had all their sales. And then they had all their like engineering like information, like what version of the firmware the thing is running and that kind of thing. So I started to get a lot of like one-off requests, like, hey, how many like support requests did we get against this version of the firmware, and how many? So I went into PHP MyAdmin way back in the day and taught myself SQL and started typing queries, and I was like, there must be a better way. So I was like, how do you do like queries? And I was like, oh, there's a thing called business intelligence, and I downloaded this open source BI tool called Jaspersoft. And I like installed it for this company in Philadelphia, Pet Innovations, and they were like loving it. I was like, I think I really like this, and I wrote a little blog post about Jaspersoft, and then I ended up working in the industry. So that's how I got out of kind of working as a practitioner. So yeah, that's where it all started.
Excellent. So Pedram, you've supported many different businesses throughout your career, as a consultant and now in your private equity firm. And we've talked earlier about how important it is for data team members to be able to understand the business.
Yeah.
So as you've gone through supporting all of these different businesses, kind of what has been your approach to learning how the business operates, how to better support them? How have you learned about your business partner's business?
So you learn to be a very good listener. The more you learn, the more you know that you don't know, basically. So instead of being the smart, try to pretend to be the smartest person in the room, you have to just learn to understand that everybody sits with an extremely knowledgeable skill set that you need to learn, and then you can combine the skills that you have together with the other person. So that has always been my approach, both to when it comes to being a consultant or being an employee at EQT and being an advisor and helping other companies. But secondly, one of the things that you need to also be good with is to understand what do I bring to the table. So what are my key skill sets, and in that specific domain is that, okay, if I'm talking with the CFO, I know that that person knows finance better than I do, but I know data better than probably, and data solutions and data transformations and IT technology better than this person do. So I try to not pretend that I know that domain better than the other person, but instead complement that person's ideas and philosophy of how they want to solve a certain problem. And again, going back to the previous speaker, Daniel, that was talking about how he is optimizing the way that he is doing finance. There are so many things happening today in Excel that could be entirely automated. So for example, things that I started off doing is just basically trying to build automated P&Ls and balance sheets straight out of the ERP instead of jumping through the hoops of using Excel and doing data corrections. To be able to do that, of course, you need to apply your other skill sets, such as data governance. So people have to avoid doing corrections on data in Excel spreadsheets and instead moving the data quality back to the sources. And that actually enables the business not only from a financial standpoint, but also the data-driven leadership in all other aspects, because then people can automate reports in other aspects of the organization as well. So again, everybody is good at what they do, and you have to be a good listener and complement the other person's skill sets, and that's the way to success.
Yeah, it's funny. I think financial data in particular can be somewhat intimidating to data team members. But then they're like not sure that they can take this on in the data warehouse. And then I'm like, but do you know what the alternative is? Do you know what people are doing in Excel? And so it's about understanding how those things can be applied, I think is so critical. So Ernesto, you talk to a lot of data team members and get a lot of insights into their issues and challenges. What do you see that, like, from your observation, which data teams have good relationships with their business partners, which ones are still on that journey, and kind of what differentiates the two?
Yeah, there's a lot of dimensions, I think, to that question. The thing that I see set folks apart is, first of all, it's the kind of like industry context of the company. There's just certain companies where data just is not as valuable to others, and there's no matter how much you try to make it. And I think in the cases of like G&A, data can play a huge role in whatever company, whatever you're doing, whether you're selling carpets out of a warehouse, you can make your finance systems better. But as far as data use cases, I think if the industry or if the company doesn't recognize that data is valuable and wants to do things with data to improve the company, that is always like a red flag for me, because I will not be able to change the minds of the CEO and the CFO about like the value of data. So as long as they have kind of some vision in that space, the rest of it's actually relatively easy to bring on board. I guess another pattern I see is who are you serving? And there's certain data teams that seem to just want to serve the C-level and ignore everybody else, and others that are more like servant type of data teams that are like, we're on the ground with you trying to make your jobs easier. I think a lot of the examples that you had, Daniel, were more around, it wasn't like, yeah, I'd like to have a little dashboard that I pull up to see how much money we have. Like, that's not that's cool, but if the data teams are focusing on that, it's not providing a lot of value to the business. No offense, Daniel. I mean, I'm sure that would be very cool to have, but I think the more kind of servant ones that are like thinking, okay, the teams on the ground, what do they need? If I'm going to go meet a customer, I have an incredible like customer 360 that I can pull up in Looker that gives me like a great snapshot of what I can talk to them about. Hey, I see you guys are using this latest feature. I see you're not using this thing. I see that you have a lot of support cases. What's happening? I see that half your team has churned. All these things are like really available to me at my level, which is quite low. So yeah.
I just need to add to that. So Ernesto is taking up a very important aspects of driving data projects. So I don't know. I'm very honest with myself that I failed a lot of projects. And one of the reasons why I failed was because I was trying to please the C-level executives without really thinking about how my project or my data product will affect the people within the organization. And coming back to data governance and making sure that the quality of data is accurate, if you don't really provide a value to the operations so that they feel that their spreadsheet that they're working on and owning, that is building their career, is actually going to be replaced with something that they will not get any benefits out of, they will not help you out. So it's extremely important to partner up with operations. It's very important that you show them by, I am here as an asset to you to teach you how you can work with DBT, SQL, build amazing things that you never be able to do with SQL anymore. And by doing that, then you're going to get partners. You're going to have heroes that are going to help you with achieving what you want to achieve. And then the CFO or the CEO will become happy because that person feels that, oh, this person has created a community of fellow people that are data-driven and not only serving me as an individual. And if you're a good CFO, then you're going to appreciate that probably. So that's a very important aspect. Another aspect that I'm seeing exactly what you're saying is today's infrastructure with IT technology is so distributed across so many applications. Previously, when we worked with Excel, I did that beginning as well. My first job was building Microsoft Office Access databases. A lot of you guys are too young to know what that even is, but that was the shit back in the days. And I built a lot of those applications, and that was very simple. You extracted some data from the SAP ERP system, and then you maybe fiddled a little bit and created a form, and that was it. Now you have one system for doing consolidation, another 3-4 ERP system. You have an HR system that is extremely complicated that also contains a lot of financial numbers. You have a budgeting system, you have an invoice approval system, you have an expense system, and all of these things you need to somehow consolidate. And would you imagine that that would be even possible to do in Excel? Of course not. Then you need to have a lot of other strategical things that you need to implement, such as entity management. How will I harmonize my chart of accounts across all of the different ERP systems? How will I harmonize the definition of an FTE across all of these systems? And so on and so on. And that, my friends, will be impossible if you try to do in Excel nowadays. So even those that you might have a couple of people out there in your organization that are trying to protect their babies, sooner or later, those babies will probably vanish, and you have to invest in a little bit more sophisticated technology. And if you do that message when you're out in operations and tell them, I'm actually going to secure your job, and I'm also going to help you becoming the next big superstar, then you're going to be successful.
Yeah, and just to build off of that, so the reason why people are using Excel today is because when you take a look at some of these tools that are being built or that have been built to stitch all of these complex applications together, I would say that the current way of doing things with these applications, it's still very complicated. And that's why no one's figured it out. Like every company that I've been at in the past, it was, okay, well, let's go and hire more enterprise systems people with specialized skill sets to create all these things that I need. And so over here, what we've done is, rather than hiring all these people with specialized skill sets in Workday and NetSuite and all of that, we're like, okay, let's simplify this as much as possible and let's hire more data engineers and data analysts that has SQL skill set, which is a more general language. And at the same time, when we do that, we've simplified these infrastructure, and we've then enabled the operations and the data teams to then move up the stack to say, hey, now that we've solved all these manual things that I used to spend 80% of my time on, I can now spend the other, now it's gone down from 80 to 15 to 20, for example. Now I can spend the other 80% learning new skills, learning the business, and then partnering with you all to drive recommendations. And that's how you make these ops and finance people even more successful, because they've moved away from doing all the manual stuff, and then to taking on more. And given the requirements of being more flexible and the evolution of what's happening in the business and globalization and all of that, there's going to be this constant need of reinventing ourselves. And I feel like right now we're at the very beginning of a decade-long journey. Most companies are learning how to move to this new modern data stack, and it's at the very beginning. So I'm very excited about where we are at this point in time.
I think all of you made some really salient points about transformation within an organization. It's insufficient to try just a top-down or bottoms-up approach. You really have to go at both ends of the spectrum in order to drive real transformation.
And to just add to that, why you need the tops-down approach, because you need to have a proper financing to build things in the right way. And if you don't have the CFO with you, and especially if you do the agile methodology, you're going to fail a couple of times, especially if you don't know finance, you're definitely going to fail. So you need to have the proper endorsements from the top leadership, but you cannot forget about the operational people either, because those are the ones that are the heroes today of your organization, and they need to become the heroes of the tomorrow's organization as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'll tee right off of that. So Daniel, you've obviously had a career that has been data oriented, but still, I think the word transformation was a little mystical, potentially, when you joined DBT Labs. So how have you leaned into the data space, learned about what the data warehouse team is doing, and really made it a part of the DNA of the organization?
Yeah, so I was at Zoom, pretty happy, and then I got recruited to join this company called DBT Labs. I didn't really know much about what ETL or ELT was, but then once I spoke to Tristan and learned more about the product and understood the problem that DBT solves, it was something that had been missing my entire career. All these things that we've wanted to do, we just didn't have a way to do it. As I mentioned, when I was prepping for earnings at Zoom, we had to go and track down certain metrics, and it was typically me and the CEO and the CFO. You track down what is ARR for this period, what is net dollar retention, all of these things, and it was a scrambling effort. And so coming in here, I said, we have this amazing platform that's in front of us, which is being used for other parts of the business. And then I told Mark 7 months ago, I said, hey, listen, I'm going to move you into this role to help me automate G&A. And the reality was that I even got pushback from my own team. They basically said, well, Daniel, revenue recognition has always been done this way. Accruals have always been done this way. Headcount, has always been done this way. And I said, let's go and lean in and do something different. And so Mark, partnering with our data team, we started to build all these use cases, and I saw the speed to execution in terms of how fast we were able to do things. We got headcount done, and within 2 months, we then got our revenue recognition, which ties exactly with our revenue for the past 3 or 4 months, done in less than a month. And our close process, which I've never seen done this quickly, has now gone down to 6 business days, and we've been doing that for the past 6 months. And I have even more higher expectations to get that down to, I don't want to scare my finance team when they look at this, but I want to get this down to 1 or 2 business days, because for anybody that has gone through a financial close, if it takes weeks, you're constantly just looking in the past, and in the past is great, but you can't do anything about the past. You need to automate yourself to look forward to the future. And in a business where I meet with hundreds of investors over the course of a year, and Tristan and I both presented at the Goldman Sachs conference, and before that I presented at the Morgan Stanley one. And so like even within 3 weeks, the messaging and the evolution of what's happening in the global markets is continually evolving. And so people want data on a more frequent basis, and they want it now. And so I've been able to just lean into things, frankly, to simplify my life and my team's life, because then that way they're able to take on more interesting projects.
Great. So, Pedram, when I think about your career, I kind of think it's like business school under fire, in the sense that you've had, all of these different experiences and had to learn a lot about a lot of different businesses over time. And so the value that you drive to your business partners is obviously very high, but you're only as effective as your team.
That's right.
So how are you intentional about teaching your data team members to learn about the business? What's that process look like where the people who work for you come up to speed on the business?
Fantastic question. And the best thing with this question is that I actually have a couple of my teammates over here, so I can look at their facial expression and see if I'm lying or if I'm telling the truth. But no, honestly, one of the things that are extremely important to me is something that I learned a lot from working at Spotify, is to building product teams. And product teams nowadays, it's very trendy to talk about data products, but this is something that I have been doing since the beginning. And why that is important is because instead of creating a very niched, specific competence type of team, a component team, I like to have the T-shaped teams where you have a full team with all of the different skill sets that is needed. You have data engineers, you have analysts, you have data scientists, you might even have software developers, software engineers within a single team serving one domain of customers. Why is that important? Because learning a domain and being a good business partner, you need to know a little bit of finance. So if you're talking with Daniel Lee, or if you're talking with your finance CFO team, they need to feel trust that when they say consolidation, if they say event-based accounting, or that was maybe a little bit too far-fetched, but if they say some type of terms like P&L, balance sheet, and things like that, that you have the conceptual knowledge about what this really means. If you don't, then it's just going to be a vendor and customer relationship, and that's not what you want to build. You want to build a partnership. So build up your product teams that is domain driven, then try to diversify the skill sets, your T-shape, so you can really solve a problem end to end. Not only that I'm just going to do the transformations. I'm only going to do the dashboarding, because then again, the customer will not feel that if I talk with this team, that this team will solve my problem. Then your customer needs to coordinate amongst 5, 6 different teams, and that's not their job either.
I know that Equity is at the forefront of like decentralized data teams. You're given members of your team are going to give a talk tonight in your office at our meetup about that very topic, about how they've like done data mesh already for the last few years. So in that same like way, are you pushing then more of the work? Are you pushing your team members into these like different departments or domains, or are you pulling in people that are already there, or how does that work?
Excellent question. It's both, actually.
Okay.
So I try to hire people from the business side to work in my technology teams very often. So the business controllers or the FP&A members of the organization, sometimes I try to poach them and hire them to my team so they learn technology. The same thing, I'm trying to send some of my teammates to sit beside the FP&A team to learn, because what happens in an FP&A team? They're constantly under pressure. They have a CFO that wants them to close in one day. So as Daniel said, so that's that's a very tough job. So they're constantly in pressure, and they don't have the time always to write down a requirement. How do I want this to work in the future? So it's super important that you have an engineer sitting very close to this person and can react as soon as they see, why are you copying and pasting this inside Excel? We do have a query, or we do already have a report. I can maybe update this report and save you 3 days or save you a week. And that will open these people's minds on how they can leverage technology in an innovative way and how they can partner up in the best way possible. Vice versa, by having the business people in your side, then they can teach what is a balance sheet, what is P&L, what is allocations, what is accrual, all of these type of terminologies to the team as well.
Cool. Yeah, we joke that it's always easier to teach a business person SQL than it is to teach an engineer about the business.
I would say I agree to some extent, but I would say that one thing that always amazes me with engineers, and that is that due to the very fast-moving engineering space and landscape, that you have to constantly learn new languages, new platforms, new ways of working in architecture. I come from an era, as I said, I work with access databases. That is not at all relevant anymore. And just looking 1 year ago, the things that I did is not relevant anymore. So we're in constant pressure of learning new things. And here is another thing that I've sometimes noticed specifically with the finance teams, that they get a little bit content. They have their spreadsheets. They've inherited from a consultant or somebody else that worked in their previous jobs before. And then the only thing that they know how to do is how to copy and paste data inside that spreadsheet. And then sometimes they know how to modify it slightly and put it into a PowerPoint. That type of people will probably not have a very bright future, I would say, in the coming era.
Yes, AI and other automation things are definitely changing the landscape for employees everywhere, which means this whole theme of enablement is even more important. So, building off of that theme, uh, Ernesto, as I mentioned earlier, you call yourself the modern dad. Tell me more about the mentorship that you provide new employees at DBT Labs. What helps bring people up to speed? What's most important for joining a new organization, and how do you learn more about the modern data stack?
I think we hire folks from all walks of life, so I think we get so much exposure to I feel myself extremely lucky to have talked to like over 250 like different data teams all over Europe to like see that. So I try to bring them into the context of like, we see a lot of this and we see a lot of this and we see a lot of this. But I think the best way is to throw people in. I actually taught my daughter how to swim last week, and she was on my back and she was able to hold her breath, and we went underwater and she loved it. And at some stage I just sort of like removed myself a little bit, and she was like and then she kind of swam and she was really happy. And I think that's kind of my strategy, is kind of like more, right, that's great, you've started, we're actually going to meet a customer in half an hour and I'm going to put you at the forefront. And I think that's the best way to get people to shine and to solve the problems in front of them and then guide them, and so they can develop their own style. I guess as I'm teaching people the kind of craft of working with lots of diverse teams, I always try to take like this, okay, let's read the equity latest like financial reports and their ESG reports and kind of like get a little bit of knowledge about what's happening broad. And then let's look at some of Pedram's like blog posts from the last 6 months and get a little bit closer. And then when we meet, then we have the kind of context of the like industry, company, and team ahead of time. So I think preparation and using your ears and mouth in that ratio 2 to 1, I think is a good way is that I try to teach new members of the team. and then I help them sign up for our retirement programs and all those kind of things. That's why I got the dad kind of thing, because giving that kind of advice.
I think, Ernesto, you're bringing another very important topic up that I think is very interesting, is the type of skill set that you need to have in the modern technology space. What is the type of skill set that you need to have? So previously, I remember when I interviewed a lot of potential employees, was I focus a lot on the hard skills. I ask a lot of things about, and this might not be very familiar to you guys, but what is a cluster index? What is an index? What is a covering index? Can you explain these things? If I want to do like a join in this way, like I did a lot of these type of questions to figure out the hard skills of the candidate. The thing is that I'm seeing that there are so many things of the hard skills that becoming commoditized today through different type of really awesome SaaS applications, that these type of skill set are not as important anymore. So for example, working with indexing, I based basically 5 years of my career on being really good with that. I was a pretty decent consultant. I got a bunch of gigs, but it's so irrelevant anymore. I actually asked my team just, I think it was a couple of months ago, hey guys, who have you ever heard about covering index? I think it was like basically 2 people that raised their hands in my team of 40 people. It was like an eye opener. So is it really the hard skills that you need to focus on when you're actually coaching and mentoring your employees and people? No, it's actually the ability of adapting, being flexible, learning new traits, learning to explore new platforms, new possibilities, learning the business side of things, and understanding and being a little bit more self-sufficient with actually figuring things out. So and I can give you an example of new interview technique that I use. I sometimes ask my candidates, can you tell me what is the main revenue stream of EQT? And then I'm just quiet. And then I just want them to philosophate about like what revenue streams do we have? And then what costs do we have? Do you know that? Can you give me a couple of examples? Now everybody that's going to come to interview with me know exactly what my question is going to be. So, it gives you an understanding of the person's innovative skills and how this person will try to understand the company and the business. And lastly, I can ask, what type of data sources do you think that these revenue and costs will live in? So you know where to start searching for when you're going to try to build your data pipelines. And that is so much more important to me, because if you want to write a SQL, you can just ask ChatGPT, give me the SQL query nowadays.
Yeah.
So that's much more important.
Yeah, I still remember, being excited about creating an Excel model and saying, I'm going to use this as part of my interview process. Build me a complex Excel model with pivot tables. That has definitely evolved over time.
Yeah, that's great feedback. It's also very sobering for me to know that I know what indexing is and have had to manage that in my career. Just to kind of continue on this thread of enablement, which I think is great. Daniel, you lead a very diverse team. It's not just finance people. You also have operations, HR, legal, etc. Pedram had mentioned earlier about aligning people to a specific business unit, et cetera, and having them develop those skills can be very great for the organization if there's specialization. But for the employee's sake, being able to rotate and get different experiences is also so important as well for their own career development and breadth of knowledge. So as a leader of such diverse teams with specialization, how do you think about giving people new experiences and enabling them and giving them a breadth of knowledge?
Yeah, so this is so interesting. I was having a conversation with some of the teams over dinner last night, and a part of them was like, okay, what makes you excited about DBT and what we're building here? I've had some amazing experiences throughout my career, and I am truly grateful to be able to manage such a complex and diverse group of individuals across the organization. But I've always been a big believer in job rotation. I want to make sure that we're not building this company to just go public. Like, to me, an IPO is just the very beginning of a long, long journey. You know, Spotify has gone public a long time ago via direct listing, and now it's this amazing, successful company that continues to grow and expand. And so I'm a big fan of curiosity, as I mentioned. I always encourage my team to try. It's better to try and make a mistake and learn from that than to just remain at status quo and not try at all. And so companies that I've seen continue to be successful is they encourage folks to rotate. And so, as Pedro mentioned, recruiting people from the business into the technology teams and vice versa, I love to see organizations get more complex and have people rotate across different roles because that's how you continue to learn and that's how you continue to add value. Because, for example, hearing about Ernesto's background, you know, being a data leader and then now moving into a customer facing role, there's definitely a lot of skill sets that are being learned there. And then over time, you know, that allows people to want to stay at this place for a long time because there's this natural ability to constantly innovate and learn. And so, you know, the key takeaway that I have is just, you know, how do I make sure that people are learning something new? And I just love the idea of job rotations.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. So one experience I think every data team member has had is just a deluge of constant request. You know, it's kind of the catch-22. The more value you provide to the business, the more requests you're going to get. And data team definitely doesn't want to be seen as a bottleneck and also wants to unlock value for the organization. So Pedram, when you're thinking about how to prioritize your data projects, what's the framework you're using? How do you decide which ones are the most valuable? What's the highest priority? What's going to create the most value for the organization?
I cannot really pretend that I'm super great at this because I have exactly the same type of problem as any other data team, data warehouse team does in the entire world. But one of the things that I think is the root cause of this type of problem is that data teams, when we start building our data products, it's gonna organically grow. So you start off with building a very niche, small, beautiful, I don't know, dashboard solution for the CFO or the business controller or whoever is consuming this. And then it morphs into a slightly bigger solution and bigger solution and bigger solution. And then it becomes the Frankenstein's monster because it has like a leg where it shouldn't have an arm and it's eyes where it should have a nose. And then all of a sudden the maintenance on that specific platform is going to be tremendously hard. So instead of thinking about unconsciously what you're adding to a platform just trying to please your customer, think about what is the specific problem that a specific data product is trying to solve. And every single time when you get a request, ask yourself, is this request going to solve the mission of this specific data product or not? And if it's not, then you have to tell this person, I'm sorry, but we're not going to build this. And then you have to have a strong leader that's going to back you up because the customer will be very dissatisfied and sometimes very verbal about the dissatisfaction as well. But this is a very important concept. Another very important concept that I would always recommend is to constantly track the value of your data products. If you're losing value, if you're losing adoption, deprecate solutions, because every solution that you have that is live will demand a level of maintenance of your team. And the more you deprecate, the more you kill, the more time you will free up to work with new innovative products. So that, I would say, consciously create a strategy for how to deprecate platform, consciously define very clear missions and strategies for every data product, and assess and build a gap analysis of the request. How far is it from my mission? If it's close to my mission, then take it on. If it's not, then push it away.
I think like the success of Excel, like you have to admit that it's been around forever and will be around forever. That type of solution is so flexible that anybody can do anything and they can build their own things, even more so than Access, which was kind of like, okay, this is like a self-service way of creating applications and things like that. So I see these kind of requests, if they come in and they're not being served, but they are somehow important, then they go into the shadow IT world. And I'm very excited about like where DBT is going with like our multi-project or DBT mesh story, because it's like finally there's a place where you can maybe offload some of these use cases. Like you said, you're taking a very platform centric approach of saying like, well, your request needs to be about something I'm adding to the platform, not an end product. That's your problem, more so. And so that's a super smart approach. We don't see that very often. We see more of like the build me a dashboard versus build me a platform where I can build the things for you. So I'm excited about like this idea that we can push more down to the business without it being Excel, because I think it's like Excel is like completely ungoverned. I guess business objects or those types of solutions are completely governed and no self-service. And we're kind of like the pendulum swinging back this way, but I think it might be the right time that it's going to work over here on this side as well. So I'm happy about that. But I love your answer to that question. Was one of the best ways I've heard that answer.
Thank you. But just adding another thing to that is to be able to act in that way, you need to also be able to build, going back again, that you have data domains and data products. And you need to think about everything that you do as a product instead of just as I'm going to please my customer. Because if you go with that strategy, you're going to really build these Frankenstein monster type of dashboards that's not going to serve people. And this is I just realized another challenge that I've seen. Business people that they really want to have access to data, but they really don't want to learn how to write SQL code, sometimes takes advantage of the dashboards to be able to do, ad hoc queries. Do you understand what I mean? So they add more and more and more columns to a certain dashboard and more data sets so that they can start filtering out things in the right-hand column pane instead of actually writing and learning how to write their own SQL. And that is very often leading towards, the Frankenstein monster of dashboards that nobody never know how to use anymore because it doesn't really have a common purpose.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's absolutely true. So one other common experience, I think, at least for myself, I could say, is that most data team members have like a capstone moment or some kind of project that they've worked on where they felt like a superstar. So Daniel, what has been your ABBA moment? What made you feel like a superstar?
Well, aside from talking about how we've automated a lot of things using DBT, because every CFO that I've spoken to, I can say that some of them are going through an IPO in the next 2 years, and their eyes light up and say, "Wow, we're doing things in such a archaic, manual way." But just to go back earlier in my career, speaking of Access Database, I was working at TiVo a long time ago. TiVo is a DVR company, pause and rewind, and so I was probably one of 3 or 4 people in the company that had access to the live Access database, because otherwise they would take a snapshot and move it into like a BI tool. And so they would give me, I was the new person, super junior, fresh out of college, and so they would give me side projects to say, run some analysis that you think is useful. And so in the US, the Super Bowl, our version of football, I understand, is super important for us. It happens once a year, and everybody, all the advertisers invest in a lot of commercials. And one of the things I wanted to know was which commercial was the most paused and rewind and all of that. And I ran my analysis, and I found some very useful insights. And my boss said, we should try to sell it to Nielsen ratings, anonymize the data, sell your analysis. And so that line of business was zero. And then that plus our B2B business, I grew that from 0 to 6 million in less than 2 years. And that was when I knew that just being curious and applying new skill sets, was always led to more interesting things.
So Ernesto, how about for you? What was your capstone data project?
Probably. Did you say catstone?
Capstone.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh,
You want me to
talk
talk
cats
about
again?
the?
No, I'm
Yeah.
not going to go that far. I worked for this BI vendor that got acquired by another company who also had a BI. This isn't Looker. This is before that. Jaspersoft is the company I worked at, and the company that bought us was called Tipco. They had a beautiful product called Spotfire made here in Sweden in Gothenburg. And so then we have this like competing tool set in the same place. And I was working as a product marketing manager, and it was kind of my job to figure out what to do. I had no idea why they acquired us and then put us kind of head to head with a product that was competing with us previously. So I started to dig into like all the deals that we won and all the deals that Spotfire won. And this is kind of small data analysis in a way, but I did find that like there was a subset of our deals that were led by a totally different persona than the others. So I found kind of like a little cluster of customers that had a totally different fingerprint than the customers that Spotfire was going after. This was like a embedded business intelligence, like inside of other software applications. So from a kind of data-driven approach, I was able to like come up with, hey, if we focus on this part of the market, we can actually grow while allowing Spotfire to grow, and we won't cross each other's paths. And that was, as far as impact, like I was really proud that something that I could come up with pivoted the little company in a new direction. So, yeah.
That's very cool. And Pedram, yourself, what's been one of the highlights of your career in terms of data projects?
I have to say that I think it's actually the data solution that I built at EQT. I think that's the one that I'm most proud of, and that's mainly due to two reasons. And to be able to explain that, I have to go back a little bit in history lane. So when I started off my career, learning building data warehouses is all about, building everything with quality. You have to have a proper design, you have to have a proper data model, you need to have information models, you need to follow the Kimball guidelines on how to work with version handling and or Inmun normalized layers. That was one of the things that I really cherished and loved. But then I just realized and decided that I have so many projects in my belt that just reaches a very good design and not actually a good execution. And I had to start questioning myself, am I executing this in the right way or not? And who am I serving by doing everything perfect? And then the question comes, but haven't you worked at Spotify? Yes, I did. And I was extremely bullish about, but I work with financial data. I cannot build a solution that has not all of the accuracy and reliability and compliance and the yada yadas in place. And that very often led to my speed of delivering products compared to some of my peers was very slower. And then I decided when I started EQT, I'm going to embrace the Spotify way entirely. I'm just going to work with the fail fast strategy, building products, work very close with customers, learning from their feedback and experience, and continuously work with delivering and iterating. And that led to amazing adoption, something that I had never seen in my entire career before. We actually managed to get dashboards all the way to board meetings, live dashboard, where they're actually slicing and dicing data in real time and discussing strategical things on the board level. Our top users of the dashboard is our chairman of the board and our CEO. They're always the top 10 users of my dashboard. I never got Daniel Ek to look at my dashboard, I have to say, unfortunately. Again, I'm so extremely proud of that moment where I really shifted my mind on how to drive data product and doing data operations. Secondly, again, and not just because this is a DBT event, but learning about DBT that I did very early on. So to give everybody again, I tried myself to build DBT versions. I tried build my own framework so many times, and I built it based on SQL. I built it based on BIML, that was a SSIS, a Microsoft tool. I built it based on my own Access databases and VBA. I went through 3 different, but I was so intrigued with how DBT was doing it. I had an entirely different mindset. I was thinking, I'm just going to build everything myself, and I'm going to keep it to myself, and I'm going to sell this extremely expensive to everyone, and I'm going to get rich. And unfortunately, I didn't get rich. I didn't get anywhere because I didn't really use the community. And that was where DBT really shined. They just doubled down on the community. They opened up everything, and they said, this is open source. Please the community. And the best developers were probably people that were working outside of DBT that was contributing to DBT. Enormous interesting, because then all of a sudden they got constantly challenged with people, but this is how a data warehouse should be built, so let's build like the time travel thingy, let's build this and that, and all of a sudden it actually fulfilled the needs of all the different type of strategies for building a data warehouse. And that was amazing to me. And adopting DBT and throwing away my own baby that was my BIML framework, I'm so proud that I did that.
Absolutely, yeah. There's so much power in the community, which is why. You wanted to?
Can I just make a comment? So just this is my first time in Europe with DBT, and I had no idea what to expect. But just leaving Munich and coming here and seeing the innovation that's happening with EQT on the data side, and then partnering with the finance ops, and then seeing what's happening with Siemens as well. It's prior to coming here, I always knew that this region was one of our faster growing regions, and there's a lot of innovation happening. But seeing how this is playing out, and this is being done at a much broader and complex scale, I'm super excited about what's happening. And these are things that I've always been dreaming of prior to joining DBT, and now seeing how this is playing out across this region is just incredible. So that was just my observation.
Excellent. Well, I know that I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I could probably do this all day. But I think the people in the crowd would like to, a few minutes of break. But we will kind of explore the power of the community that you all have here. We'll follow up our break with a roundtable discussion where you all can share your insights and experiences with each other so that you can learn from each other and drive value. But I want to thank our panelists for joining us up here today. This has been a great discussion, so join me in a round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.
And we'll adjourn for 15 minutes, and we'll get started with the roundtables around 11:40.